Welcome, Hornets, and thank you for joining me. Today, you'll notice we're going to be taking a look at our Honors Pre-Calculus pretest. This is for Chapter 2, Part 2, where we're working with the rational functions. Now, you'll notice here we have our first polynomial, and we are wanting to factor this. So when we factor it, we're just going to go ahead and factor out the x and the 2x, x from the numerator, 2x from the denominator. You notice I have that right here. And because they share x in both the numerator and the denominator, we know we have a whole at x equals 0. Now, please remember, if ever you want to write the equation without that x, that's the common factor, you have to include the restriction in the domain. If you don't, they are not equivalent, and you're doing something wrong. So always remember that if you decide to write it without that limit in it, or without that x. So we want to start off by finding our zeros. Once we eliminate and identify the whole, it is no longer a 0, leaving us with only x plus 1 in the numerator. X plus 1 yields x equals -1, and therefore -1 is our first and only x-intercept. We've identified that the whole is at 0, so we can now go to our vertical asymptotes. The vertical asymptotes come from the denominator, so I let x minus 3 equal 0, and I solve, giving me x equals 3. Now, unlike zeros, where all we do is write the value, asymptotes require us to put either x equals or y equals, so that we can identify it as either a line, a curve, or a vertical line. Finding our y-intercept, we have a problem because if we try, y-intercepts are when x equals 0. But that is the location of the whole, and therefore there are no x-intercepts. When we try to find our horizontal intercept, we're going to do long division. And when we do our long division, you'll notice that we end up with the horizontal asymptote, y equals 1/2. And there is no way for us to divide 2x squared into 4x. We then move to the next portion. And in order to do my left and right hand rules, I have to understand what's actually happening. I am approaching this limit, y equals 1/2, from both ends. So this is going to be my left end rule and my right end rule. We're going to write the left end rule as the limit as x approaches -infinity for our f of x, and we get 1/2. Then we go to the limit as x approaches +infinity. This is our right end rule, and it is also 1/2. So this is the left end rule, and this is the right end rule. We're now going to go to our limits. Now, in order to do these limits, we have to graph first. Otherwise, we're going to make an error. So let's go ahead and graph everything that we currently have, and we will have to locate the position of the whole. So we're looking at a horizontal at 1/2. I'm going to graph that right here. Let's make sure you can see that. There is the y equals 1/2. We have a vertical asymptote at 3. So we put 3 on the graph. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to place my -1, which is a 0. And I've got this y-intercept. Now, in order to find the y value of the whole, we're going to take the limit as x approaches that x value 0 for the polynomial without the x. All right, so we want the factored form that has been reduced. Now, when I plug in a 0, I get 1 over -6. And so we have a point right there, and that point is 0, -1/6. I'm just going to finish up by drawing my curve. Then I'm going to look at it and I'm going to make sure that I put a hole and not just a solid point. Remember, we want an open circle to represent that hole. And now we have our graph, at least the first part. I'm going to identify the pieces, -1, 0, and 0, -1/6. Now we have one other portion that we have to draw, and we know that based upon the order. Notice that our order here around the x equals 3 is 1, and because it is odd, we know that the two curves have to go in opposite directions. So if I am moving toward -infinity on the left-hand side, I'm going to +infinity on the right. Now just make sure you label everything, or you will end up getting it wrong. And I don't want that. We can now finish the last little bit. Approaching 3, here's 3. From the left, you'll notice the curve is going to -infinity. This is the lower rule, or the left hand, or the low end rule. Our high end rule is approaching from the positive side, so we're coming in from this way, and you'll notice this is approaching +infinity. And here we have our answers. So we found the 1/2 for our left and right end rule. We identified that there are no y-intercepts because it's a hole on the graph. We found what we're doing is we approach 3 from the left and from the right. We found our horizontal asymptote, our vertical asymptote, the location of the hole, and our zeros. We put them onto our graph. We make sure that we label each part very carefully, and we're done. And this is the first part of our pretest question number 1. I hope it helped. If it did, please make sure you click like. And if you have concerns or questions, please make sure you ask them, and I'll do my best to try to answer your questions in class. Thank you very much. Part 2 is next. This will be question number 2 from the pretest. Thank you.